welcome everyone, class of 2019 parents, to the launch of the College Search. We are on Facebook Live this morning for families that were unable to be here. So keep that in mind as you ask questions, that this is a live event and that questions that are personal in nature should probably be held either for family meetings, which we'll talk about, or for after. We'll take Q&A off a Facebook Live at the end. We are going to tag team this. We have a lot of information for you today about the College Search, what's going to happen in the coming months, how we work with students, how you need to be involved, how the kids need to be involved, and at the end, part 2 of this presentation is exclusively about learning disability support programs. So if that does not apply to you, when we get through section 1, which is the bulk of the program, feel free to leave. We'll take a short break in between. So this may or may not be for everybody at the end. Let's introduce ourselves. I guess we'll start with that. I think I know most of you. I'm Hannah Sirota. I've been at McLean School since fall of 2000, so I've been here a long time. Prior to that, I worked in college admissions pretty much all of the 90s at Oberlin College in Ohio in a selective admissions environment. So I bring a lot of experience working with students here, but also understanding what's happening on the college side to my work with students.
Good morning. I'm Kathleen Glynn Sparrow. I'm new to McLean, but not new to college counseling. I have 18 years in the field. I'm coming to you from Stone Ridge in Bethesda, and I was also at St. Andrew's Episcopal School just down the road. Prior to that, I was at the Ben Franklin Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, where I worked with students with learning style differences. And something that might be of interest to you, my own daughter just went through the process, so I'm here to tell about it. She's safely ensconced in college. Hopefully she's doing her work. We'll find out soon when grades come out. And then I have a son, Aiden, who's a sophomore here. So big fan of McLean and drinking the Kool-Aid just like you guys are.
I guess I should also add that I have the empathetic parent hat because my son is a senior in high school this year. So we're in waiting mode at the moment. Okay. I've been doing this long enough that I get kind of wonky sometimes on this, but I think context to understand why we are where we are with the frenzy over college admissions is important. And if you can take yourself back, it's funny, every year I have to think, I'm going to have to start to revise this because the parents are getting younger and younger and I still get older and older. But if you go back to sort of the dark ages in the 70s and the early 80s of what was going on in college, on college campuses and how colleges approached the recruitment and enrollment of students, vastly different from what's going on today. First of all, the baby boomer, the end of the baby boom graduated from high school in 1982. And colleges were really concerned that there was going to be this huge decline in the number of college-going students because most of the population actually didn't go to college then, right? So everyone was concerned, what are we going to do in order to fill our classes? Because when the baby boomers came along, all of a sudden there was expansion of college campus, and expansion of enrollment size, and expansion of residential facilities. And now all of a sudden there was going to be this lack of students to fill these places. So colleges started to go into this mode of how are we going to fill the seats in our classrooms. Marketing emerged for the first time. Colleges really didn't market much before this, a little bit, but not a lot, and really took off. In 1983 was the first publication of the U.S. News and World Report rankings, and that was a game changer. And then all of a sudden everybody wanted to be number one. The original rankings was a questionnaire to college presidents. What do you think are the best schools? And they submitted it, so obviously it's gone way, way beyond that at this point. But that was also a game changer. And then the last thing is the dinosaur age in technology. And obviously everything is very different there. I remember, so it dates me, but I remember using a computer for the first time. It was my senior year in college. And I had a floppy disk, and I lost the paper, and I said, I'll never use one of these again. Anyway, so that was my life in college. But there were these big changes. First of all, there was this huge surprise in demographics. So the college-going population actually increased instead of decreasing. And partly it was the influx of women, international students, underrepresented students, and non-traditional students, meaning adult learners, all of a sudden flooding college campuses in a way they had not before. Again, you've got this expansive marketing, sophisticated marketing going on, and rankings start to drive policy on college campuses, and that's key, because everybody wants to be number one. And then technology leads the way in terms of the ease of applying and the ease of communicating with students and staying connected and all of that. So what that led to is what we have today, which is fierce competition for what colleges perceive top students or top students within their own pools. Extreme selectivity, meaning 5, 4, 7%. It's crazy. Think about the number of students they're saying no to in those kinds of pools. At a very small number of colleges, they get all of the attention. And that creates tremendous anxiety for students and parents around this entire process. Add to that the increased costs of college education and extremely complex formulas for figuring out how colleges are going to meet need of students or not meet need of students and preferentially package with merit awards students. So it's complex. This is a fun one. To sort of absorb that for a second. The cost increase here in colleges and public is even higher than private universities and what's happened in cost of education. So here we are. So our choice is we either sort of become overwhelmed, focus on not being able to get in anywhere, everything's too selective, it's crazy, and approach it from that point of sort of anxiety and paralysis. Or you shift focus and shift mindset and think about what is the best fit for me, this is a student, and also the parent, and for my kid, and approach it from a student-centered endeavor to find the places where the student will thrive.
And that's where we come in. When you found high school, the high school that fit your son or daughter, you found McLean, right? The college process is going to be just like that. You're looking for the place that your son or daughter will thrive. So the way we do it here is we get to know the students and we look at fit at a couple different levels. Academic fit. Does the school make sense? Will your child be appropriately challenged there but not overwhelmed? Personal fit. What's the location like? Would your student do better in a city atmosphere or an idyllic, kind of more rural environment might be better for him or her? And then financial fit, affordability. You just saw that slide. Something you may not be familiar with that's kind of new or to the process is something called Net Price Calculator. And on each college website, they have this little, great little device, Net Price Calculator. You enter in your financials, kind of like your tax information, your family earnings, and it'll churn out for you what's called an EFC, an expected family contribution. So if you enter in your financials and tuition is 60 grand, it'll tell you your family would pay 60 or 40 or $2, whatever matches. This is something I encourage you to do this spring. You can go to any college website. Let's say your student is considering Susquehanna. Go ahead and go to their website, do the net price calculator just to educate yourself about how much that college might cost for you. It does not take into account merit aid and those kind of extras, but it does give you a sense of where you stand financially. So what have we done so far? The 11th grade class went as a group to visit Stevenson University, about an hour away near Baltimore. It's a great way to kind of kick off the process. We're all together, takes out some of the jitter of seeing a college campus. What do I do? How do I act? So they had coaching on all of that, and they've had the thrill of sitting for the PSAT and the pre-ACT. That gave them very good practice for sitting for a standardized test. What does it feel like to sit and do that and be serious and just kind of, wow, this is my future. It's kind of an aha moment for them, but done in a setting that they're very familiar with. So it's a nice introduction to standardized testing. If you have touched base with Ms. Sirota and you need accommodations, those are in place for the SAT. We'll talk a little bit about more about that later. We also took the students to the Bolger Center for some kind of class bonding and a kickoff for the college process. While they were there, they kind of did some self-reflection, kind of do what you are, personality profile. They got to design their ideal college, start to think about what do I want, what's important to me in a school. And then, of course, we had finished with bingo because every good retreat needs a little bingo. Kind of introduce them to the terms because you need to know the vocabulary in the process. That's part of the piece that can be overwhelming is they don't know what these terms mean, early action, early decision. So we're here to help with that. This is to give you a sense of what's coming this spring. That sounds very ominous. It's not ominous. It's happy time, right? Beginning the future. You're going to start thinking about test prep. What works best for your student? Would he or she do better in a class or one-on-one? or maybe free online prep, like through Khan Academy is the best way for you. And we can help with all these decisions. These aren't decisions we're chucking out to you and say, good luck, let us know how it goes. Test registration, this winter or so, you'll be signing up for ACT or SAT, and we'll guide you on which test is appropriate for your student. And you'll have student and family meetings. You're gonna get a sign-up genius shortly in the mail, an email. It looks like a wonderful invitation to a holiday party. It is not. It is a wonderful invitation to come meet with us in our office. I guess I could bring hostess gifts, though. If
Yeah, they
wanted to.
could,
We
sure.
pretend it's but those meetings, the directions are in there, but we encourage you to, those meetings are really important. There's a lot of questions that you have, understandably, and that's a great place to get that done. Bring all your questions to those. You're gonna start doing some college research and forming a list. The list actually won't even be finalized till next fall, so don't think we don't have a list, we don't have a list. You're just in the exploratory process right now. We would like you to attend the Washington Area Independent School College Fair on April 18th. It's the one big fair that I really think is worthwhile. It'll be held at Georgetown Prep in the evening. We'll give you directions on that and specifics as that approaches. And then you'll start to do college visits, and those visits are really, I think, the #1 helper in the process of what is a good fit for my student. It helps your student too. They don't really know if they're big, small, whatever, until they set foot on campus. So good time to get started on those. And then summer plans. This summer, your kids are gonna be rising seniors. I know that's hard to digest. They should do something productive. That means a job, volunteering, take a class, something other than sun tanning, okay? Why? Because colleges often ask, that age-old question, what did you do last summer? And we want them to have a productive answer for that. Whatever's appropriate for your student. Okay, so organization is key in this process. We suggest you develop some kind of a system. You can go old school with folders. You can go, I guess it's not really avant-garde Google Doc anymore, but maybe you want to use that approach. Something that keeps everybody on the same page and organized. You're going to get a lot of mail from colleges and universities. Mail equals love. You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, Yale wants me, Harvard wants me. They don't necessarily want you, they do want your application. So keep in mind that the mail is marketing, and we'll help you figure out what's legitimate and what's just marketing. We'd like students to use the school email address for everything. It keeps it simple. We'll encourage them to check email. We're not texting them during the day, we're emailing them. So when colleges send email, we want them going to that McLean email so they get everything in one shot. You'll be registering for testing, confirmation. 11th grade school papers, something I've been delighted to learn this year is in Mr. Booth's English class. They do a great essay that we've seen this year works nicely in transitioning to a college essay. So encourage your student to keep a hold of those essays. And we're gonna tell them all this too, okay? So it's not all on you to share this. And then of course you'll have a bunch of miscellaneous items as we go through.
Okay. I think I get the testing section,
Yeah,
right?
enjoy,
Up to
enjoy.
me.
Mhm.
So I call this an American rite of passage. It's not fun, it's just something that everybody does. And I tell that to the kids. It's just this thing that we all have to get through. And here are the questions you may have initially. So first of all, when? The timing is pretty much now. Winter, spring, we want to have at least one SAT or ACT for most students. There are always exceptions to rules, but for most students, we want to have at least one test during the spring because we've got to have some idea of where the student is with testing. The PSAT scores, by the way, should be here shortly, and we will be sending those home with the original test book and a recommendation based on last year's PSAT, the planned test from last year, and this year's PSAT on which way we think the student should go. And then, obviously, if you have questions about that, let us know. All colleges except SAT or ACT need to be very clear about that. There's no advantage to doing one over the other. The advantage is the one that the student's going to do better on. Same test 2 times, maybe 3 times. There's research to show diminishing return for the students who take these things 5 and 6 times, so that we don't recommend that. Occasionally it happens, but typically 2 or 3 times, and that's because of super scoring. And I don't know if that's a familiar term or not, but basically if you go and take the SAT on 2 different test dates and you got a higher math test the first time and a higher verbal test the second time, those 2 scores, you send both score reports, but those 2 scores are merged into a new composite score, and it's to the advantage of the student. most but not all colleges SuperScore. Subject tests, we throw this in here just so you know about them. These are the old SAT 2s. I took a couple of them in high school. They're in academic subjects, so foreign languages. There are 2 levels of math, science, chemistry, biology, physics, history, things like that. They're 1-hour exams on the same day as an SAT. I think there are 29 colleges left that either recommend or require them. Most students do not have to deal with these. If, as we're talking, it appears that there are some schools that are SAT subject, potential schools for your son or daughter, we'll talk about how to approach this and which test to take. But it's unlikely. To prep or not to prep, I mean, the bottom line is, in this area, everybody preps. Everybody, right? So you put yourself in a competitive disadvantage if you don't. And because scores are getting boosted among your peers in the DC area. So for the most part, it makes a difference and it can help. And how do I register? Registration directly through College Board or ACT. So we do not register for students for the tests. I do have here for you all the test dates with the registration deadline and also score release date, which is pretty cool. They don't always hold to that score release date, by the way, but that's their projected score release date. For students needing accommodations on standardized testing, it's a little bit of a different process between these two. For the SAT, once the student receives the SSD number, the SSD codes, which is their terminology, that code you use every time you register for the test. So we don't have anything to do with it. You got the code. If you need a reminder, I can look it up for you. But hold on to the letter that comes from College Board because that's how you get accommodations. And by the way, those accommodations hold for AP exams also. You don't have to do anything about that. We take care of it. But it's College Board. AP is College Board. For ACT, it's a little bit different. You register for the test, get to the point of does the student need accommodations? Yes, the student needs accommodations. There are 2 different types of accommodations. If the only thing the student needs is 50% extended time, the student's going to get bumped to National Test Center in a special room with 50% extended time, self-paced. Anything else, a reader, 100% extended time, audio, multiple day testing, all of those things are considered special testing. So you have to answer those questions, complete the registration, and send the confirmation email to me. I then go into our school administrative account, do what I need to do to request the accommodations, and then it goes from there. And every time for the ACT, it's the same process. I need to know that the student has registered. Whereas here, I don't need to know. They'll just show up on a roster. I don't get a roster. I need to know each time that the student has registered, or it won't trigger the accommodations. It's not a great process. It's new for ACT. Okay. So we have a lot of this. There are students who are just not good test takers, and it just sort of doesn't matter. A couple things about this. First of all, there's this massive movement away from standardized testing, and has been going on for quite some time. And there are a whole bunch of colleges, like sort of, Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby have been test optional for decades, I want to say, like 20 years or something. And every year, more colleges are jumping on the test optional bandwagon. The thing to be aware of is that there are different kinds of testing. Test optional means different things, different places. So for some schools, it's straight up test optional. You don't like your scores? Don't send them. For other schools, they say, you don't like your scores? Send us something else. Send us a portfolio, an academic portfolio, send us a graded paper. They may have a minimum GPA. There are a whole bunch of schools that have, if you have a 3.5, then you can be test optional. We've run into students who have a 3.45. College says no, can't go test optional. Hard, firm 3.5. So some of them are more test flexible than optional. So you have to kind of see. And then fairtest.org tracks colleges and the movement towards. And that actually, I think is, I'm going to put this online. That's a hyperlink there for you too. Oh, and the one other thing I just want to say, last year for the first time, I had a student not take the standardized test. She knew that she wanted to be close to home. She knew she didn't want a really particularly competitive college, and she knew that she didn't want to take one of these because it wasn't going to show her her best. And there are a whole bunch of schools in the DC area, DC, Maryland, Virginia, so that we had choices. She never took one of these tests. So, the problem is, if you don't take them, it closes out options. So in a way, it's better to take the test, and then we deal with, maybe you don't send, maybe, you could still apply to just test optional schools. The one other thing I want to say is don't send your scores anywhere when you register, because you have this option of doing free, sending scores to 4 colleges for free. Don't do that. We want to look at scores before they're sent anywhere, so never take advantage of that. In the end, it's like $11 per school per report, but like chump change in the big scheme of things, and can make a difference. You don't want them seeing negative scores. Okay, and so which leads us to, what is this college search, and how are we going to find a good match for each student?
So I'm just going to hit upon a few of these factors.
Yep.
I won't talk about all of them. Size of institution and class size. Typically when students come out of a small school, they think, okay, I've done this. Now for college I want big. I want to paint my face blue. I want to go cheer for the football team. And I get that. We get that. But it's important to think about, where have they done well? They've done well in a small school with great teacher access and small class sizes. So that's not to say don't look at big universities, but to keep that in mind. And I do encourage, if your student is interested in a big university, go take them to the University of Maryland. Tour on a class day. When classes change, there'll be a sea of people. Your student will either feel energized by that and love it, or feel overwhelmed and think, this is not for me. But do keep in mind as you go through the process that your student has thrived in a smaller environment. And even a small college is going to feel huge compared to McLean, okay? So just something to think about. Retention. Retention is how many people are coming back for sophomore year. That's a statistic you want to look at in college books. You want to see that in the 90s, 90% of students coming back. Things happen. Kids get sick, money issues, things like that. But if you're looking at something in the 80s or lower, where 20 to 30% of the kids aren't coming back for sophomore year, that's a red flag. This process is fun and games, right, but you don't want to repeat it just because. So if you do your research on the front end, it's good. Think about curriculum structure. Some colleges offer a block schedule, like Colorado College, where the student just focuses on one class for a semester and then switches to another subject. That might be a good idea. Or maybe there's a co-op program like Drexel, where they do classes for a semester and then they go out into the real world and do an internship, things like that, hands-on. Think about the academic climate. Is it cooperative or is it competitive? What would your student enjoy more? Student body, student life, what's the vibe on campus? I had a parent once quote a term called, she looked for the smile factor on campus, meaning when she walked around, were people smiling and greeting as they went through? Were people holding doors? Was it a friendly atmosphere and welcoming? Food options, all that kind of stuff. Academic support's a big one. Visit the Student Support Center when you're on campus. Take a look at the facilities. Is it a basement office operated by an old lady like me and nobody's going to go use it? Or is it centrally located, brightly lit, free popcorn? I would go if there's free popcorn. Maybe they're all for that. Do you have to pay for tutoring? That might be a deterrent. Or do you have to make an appointment? I know my own sheriff, if there's a paper due on Friday, he's not going to think, oh, I've got a paper due on Friday, I should really make an appointment on Tuesday so I've got plenty of time. It's going to be Thursday night, oh, rats, I have a paper due the next day, I better get to tutoring. So think about how your student would work best. Okay, next one. Little slide here. What does the unbiased college guide say about Flensburg University? It says the academics are so-so, the athletics are undistinguished, the faculty is lame, the social life is dead, the campus is ugly, and the admissions department rejected my application 15 years ago. All right, we just put this in here to remind you to keep a sense of humor during the process. It will serve you well, okay?
And also remember context of who's saying what.
Who's saying what, that's true. All right, in generating a list, a few things, we're going to give you some specific resources in a minute, but I just want to point out 2 things. Word of mouth. This area, as you know, is very intense. The DC area, great things come with that, and not so great things come with that. I encourage you to follow your own path. We'll kind of coach the students on what to say when they get lambasted and by uncles and aunts, why aren't you applying to this school? We'll teach them how to come up with a single line that says, I have a great list, I'm really excited about it, I'll let you know how it comes out. I always like to say that cocktails and college talk do not mix. When you're going to these holiday parties, change the subject, okay? Just somebody, it just breeds itself, right? And shield yourself. You're gonna be talking to parents and somebody will say, oh, your child's looking at that school? That's my kid's safety school. You know, like obnoxious. We have all types in this area. Lovely people too, but just protect yourself, right? Naviance is an excellent source, okay? It's bias-free, it's data. We have data in there about how McLean students have fared in the process over the past. So we're gonna show you guys how to do that, but the code in your packet, if you didn't get one on the way out on the break over by Miss Diamond, there's alphabetical order packets. That code unlocks the key to this college counseling search engine that has just a plethora of information on it, right? So that's a good resource to use.
And that's your students page. So everything on there is specific, so the GPA is updated on there at the end of every semester, and test scores go in when we get them, so that's information on just your student.
Gotcha. Here are a couple, I won't go through them or read each one, but some sources that we both find very helpful that are worthwhile. StayOffCollegeConfidential.com. I know this is Facebook Live, I don't want to get sued for saying that. But that's just a rumor mill. Anybody can post something. I can come back from a college visit and say this college stinks. They also, I have seen it cause a lot of stress, where someone says, University of South Carolina released their decisions, and a student will come down to my office and say, I didn't hear anything, so I guess I didn't get in. And I'll say, how do you know they released? Oh, College Confidential. And I'll say, they didn't release. We know when they're releasing. I told you not to go on College Confidential. So stay off that. All right, campus visits are important, as we mentioned. I want to talk about this term, demonstrated interest. You may be familiar with it, you may be not. The process has a little bit of a game element now. It's quite distasteful if you want my opinion. But demonstrated interest is, how much love are you showing the school? Love in terms of interest. Are you visiting? Are you going to local fairs? Is your child signing up for the email distribution list? Some colleges use that factor of demonstrated interest as part of their admissions decision. They're trying to gauge what are the chances that your child is going to accept their acceptance, okay? That plays into their yield, and yield is how many people accept the acceptance, and that's one of the factors in the U.S. News World Report, which we don't think is a great tool, but people are involved with that. So that's what demonstrated interest is. When you do visits, plan ahead. You need to register online. You don't want your in-laws showing up on your doorstep during the holidays. Show your college the same courtesy. Don't show up on the doorstep. It's very easy to register on the website for tours. Ideally, you want to go when the students are on campus because you'll get a sense of the vibe, the energy. But if summer is the only time that your family schedule allows you to go ahead, get a first look. You'll get a sense of place and space, and you can always go back and visit again when students are there, if it becomes a viable option for you. Information sessions and tours are obviously good. I encourage families to eat in the dining hall, grab a coffee, and get up the nerve to ask a student, what's one thing you like about the school? What's one thing you don't like about the school? Get them after they've had their snack, because they're a little friendlier. Sit in on a class. Again, you cannot just drop in, right? You just ask ahead from admissions if that's an option. All those kinds of things. I won't go through all those. Question, yeah?
Do you have a recommendation on visiting on a weekday versus a weekend? Like, how valuable is it to be there on a week? Obviously, you can't sit in on class if it's weekend, but.
It's a good question. I think it has to do with scheduling too. You know, if we have a long weekend and your students, you want to balance missing classes here with the travel. Right. I think you get a sense either way. I guess I usually do weekdays, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to do weekends, particularly as in the junior year, as a first look at a college campus, and it does check off all the boxes for demonstrated interest. You've taken the time to go to the college. Mm-hmm. Most colleges have tours and information sessions on Saturdays, at least in the morning, so you can do an official visit at least on Saturdays. But I would say, go back. If the student is then admitted to the school, go back and see it in action as a senior, and then sit in on classes and do all that to see sort of the academic environment.
And I wanted to mention too, we do college visits and get out there and see the schools so that we can talk to you firsthand about them. One of the things I do on visits is I pick up a student newspaper because it talks about the issues that students are fired up about, but the administration isn't mentioning. Like, is safety a problem on campus? Can students not get into the classes they want? Those kinds of things. So student newspaper is a good resource. All right, interviews. Interviews have kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. Each college does it different. Some don't require them at all. If your student does need to do an interview, we encourage them to come to us for practice. We do practice interviews right in our office. I used to do alumni interviewing for my college. We use questions, get them ready. It's one thing to read about a question on paper, like tell me about your family, it sounds easy. It's another to articulate it. And we're nice and we coach them and say, that was a great answer, but you might want to think about this. I would not schedule an interview if, let's say you're going to Fordham and that's your child's first choice college. Don't make that be the first interview, right? You want them to have a little practice with some other schools first. Sometimes interviews will be on campus. Sometimes reps will come to town and host them locally in a hotel lobby. Sometimes they'll meet an alumni for coffee at Starbucks. So we teach them all the aspects of the interview. Also, something to know about and to help coach your child on, is the interview informative? Is it just to learn about the school, like the college is using it as maybe a marketing tool? Or is it evaluative, meaning that the responses that your child gives will be recorded and it will be part of the admissions process? But just to put this in perspective, the interview is a very small factor in admissions, and it is very rare that that will tip the scales for a student one way or another. You've been on the college side, so I don't know if you want to.
But it can.
But it can, Ms. Juvenile. Everything's got a double answer. Smoke and mirrors, right, okay.
But the key, and the one thing I just want to point out here is this not until ready.
Yeah.
Typically, juniors are not ready to interview. And I know that that's, not convenient to have to maybe go back or schedule another whatever, but because of this two-way conversation, unless the student can answer the question, what do you like about this school, or why are you looking at this school, or it has to be beyond the trying to figure it out stage for the student before you interview.
Do you guys talk to them? I mean, the interview is nice and asking questions and back and forth, but do you talk to them about how to manage the expectation with the interview or the anxiety surrounding the interview? And for those of us who may or may not have a child who is going to have to audition to get into a program, do you talk to them about that as well?
Typically, students who are auditioning are working with music or theater coaches outside of school.
I got
right?
that part.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you
Oh, okay.
to prepare
Right,
my
right,
child
right,
for
right.
his audition.
We're not
But
very
they-
good
but-
singers either.
I'm asking a different question,
Yeah.
because around that is also an interview process. Like, you don't stand up on a stage or sit down at an instrument and just start playing.
Right.
There's a conversation that occurs. So do you put them into that environment or have a conversation with them about that environment?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I
Because it's
haven't-
highly
in terms
competitive
of, in terms
and
of
it
perfor-
comes with-
honestly, in terms of performing arts, I have not.
Okay.
Because I leave that to the
Well,
professionals.
but you have a lot of kids coming
But-
up in this class who are going to be auditioning. A lot of them, whether it's the arts or music. So what are you guys doing about that? Because it is a different class than some of the others.
Well, we've had other students go into performing arts
That's,
programs.
that's not what I'm
I think.
asking. This class itself has a lot of kids who are very talented in the theater, in music, in voice, in art. Are you guys going to help address that?
We do not have a special program for performing arts.
Okay.
We don't. We do general. I mean, I worked at a college that had a conservatory for music, so I'm familiar with the process.
no, I know
But,
about
but-
Oberlin.
But the interviewing process in the admissions office, absolutely.
Okay, if you can't get to a school, let's say it's far away or the schedule doesn't allow it, what can you do? We have many, many reps. I don't know how many we had this fall, probably 100 reps come to McLean. That's pretty extraordinary. We only have 29 seniors this year. And all those reps are coming through hoping to get an applicant, all right? So it shows that McLean is out there and doing well. So the rep visits, the rep comes here and the students will meet in our office and we're there and it's just a casual dialogue. But we also teach them how to interact with the reps. We give them sample questions to ask the rep, a lot of guidance with that. There'll be local receptions. A college might be hosting something at a Hyatt and you can go to that. These are all things that demonstrate interest as well. Alumni interviews we talked about. Registering on the website just means kind of signing up for the school's email so they can track that. And college fairs, we talked about that. Yeah, and I think we covered demonstrated interest. Okay, so what are the colleges looking at? The transcript is the #1 piece of information that they're looking at. And the way the reps explain it to me is that's 3 years of demonstrated hard work in the classroom with different teachers, different subjects. So in their view, it's a better indication of how successful a student will be in college, right? Having said that, if you have a student who did not have a good 9th grade year or had a health issue sophomore year, we address that in the rec letter that we'll be writing on behalf of the student. So don't hear this and think, oh, we're doomed, we had a bad freshman year or whatever. Life happens where we can help deal with that. Test scores are a factor if it's not a test optional college. The essay is the face of the application. I mentioned Mr. Booth's class, but we also have years of experience with working with college essays, and we'll work with your students on that. We do a summer boot camp before senior year where the 2 of us are there working with the students just on essays and applications. Recommendations. One of the great things about having your student here at McLean is that the teachers really know your students. Think about a public school teacher, and I'm not knocking on public schools, but a public school teacher that has 30 or 40 kids in a class versus a McLean school teacher that has so much fewer. They really get to know the students on a different level, and that shows in the college recommendations. And as I mentioned, we will write a comprehensive letter about your student as well. Extracurricular activities, don't necessarily worry about my daughter or son is not a leader in everything. They're looking for depth. Did they get involved in robotics? Stick with it. Have they been involved in plays, sports? What is their thing, and how have they developed an interest outside of the classroom? And then institutional priorities. This is something that's out of your control and out of our control. What does that mean? In any given year, a college might have different things they're looking for. Maybe they need more tuba players. Maybe they need more boys. Maybe somebody just named a library on campus and their kid's getting in that year, okay? So that stuff is out of your control, so I wouldn't get bogged down in that. I would think about things that you can control, which is being a support for your student during the process. And then you want to get a sense of the college. Is it looking to admit students or looking at reasons for denying students?
Okay, so the first thing that colleges look at is the objective criteria: transcript, courses, grades, test scores if they're using them. But those factors alone do not capture students' readiness to be successful in college. And there's more and more research on this, on the soft factors for academic success. And so you've got all this objective stuff, which is half, but a student's motivation, study habits, the courses that they pick to make sure that they're in the right course of study and not studying something that sort of doesn't work for them, their interest, their commitment, being in the right environment, all of that is equally important in terms of student success, and another reason why fit is so important. At McLean, we have a lot of students who I would call sort of emerging students. There are many students here who maybe in middle school and 9th grade were not necessarily stellar students who grow over the 4 years here. I remember my first year here was when the school added a 10th grade class. And it come directly out of a highly selective environment, so I was sort of used to working with those kids who were high school seniors. And I got here, and within about, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I thought, these kids are never gonna be ready for college, it's not gonna happen. And because they were sophomores at the beginning of the sophomore year. By the time they came back as juniors, all of a sudden, there was some maturity that had kicked in. It's like, oh, maybe we'll be okay. And then by senior year, I was looking at a whole different person from what I saw when they were 15 years old or late 14 years old in the beginning of the 10th grade year. So we have a lot of these students who emerge as students. What's key is that things like study habits, motivation, commitment, that those things in the senior year are intact and ready to be able to manage college life. I will say that every year I have parents who this time of year question is should we be looking at college? I always have a few of those. And what I would say is if you have those concerns, we should talk about them, but keep in mind that your child may not be the same a year from now. And there's maturation that's going to happen. We're going to talk with the kids, so I threw this in here for you because we're going to talk to the students about the difference between high school and college because it's big. And if you've been to college, you understand this, but I just want you to understand, to know that we're gonna be talking to the kids about this too. And the amount of initiative and responsibility and dedication that it requires to get through college successfully. We also here don't just talk about getting into college, we talk about getting in and also getting out. Because getting in is only the first part. Getting in and then flunking out or being asked, or asked to leave or not being successful or whatever is not a good outcome, right? Graduating from college is the goal, hopefully in 4 years. Although colleges track 6-year numbers, not 4-year numbers, just so you know. So we talk about this with the kids, and when we build college lists, we like to talk about 3 categories. Likely schools are schools where we feel the student has a very, very strong likelihood of being admitted, but it also is a school that the student likes. So we want it to be a win-win. We don't want it, I don't like to use the word safety school. It was a safety school when I was applying to college. We talked about safeties. We try not to use that language at all, because who wants to go to a safety school? You want to go to school you like. So we want to have 2 schools, even though we're pretty sure, you can never be 100%. So we like to have 2 schools in this likely category. Then, by the way, this is also, if you're seeking merit money, this is where you're getting it. In the biggest dollar amount is these likely schools. The next category is 50-50 or target. These are schools where maybe the student has one thing that's slightly off in terms of when you look at objective criteria, or like scores are just out of the averages, or the rigor isn't maybe quite what we think it might need to be, or it's just by virtue of the school being a really selective school and the student looks like the student fits in perfectly, but it's pretty selective. So there are schools like this. You might have 4 or 5 of these. Hopefully my numbers add up. I didn't think this through this morning. Okay. And then reach schools. These are the schools that we don't expect the student to get into, but for me, a reach is still like it could happen. And so what I say to students is, if you're admitted to a reach school though, be ready to work. Because it's either one of 2 things. It's either a school that for everybody it's a reach school, so it's a really fast-paced, rigorous, competitive environment, or it's a reach school for you, meaning that you are at the bottom 25% of the applicant pool, which means the same thing ultimately. So this is for ambitious, highly motivated, can feel like they have a competitive spirit, can keep up with everybody. Students do not have to apply to reach schools, and you're not getting merit money from a reach school. Have to do these, typically do some of these. Most of our students end up doing some, but we don't require students to have reach schools. I personally have a category called It's Never Gonna Happen. So occasionally I pull that card. I'll tell you, they do it nicely, but I'll tell you if that's.
So how do you express to them you're never going to get into the school that you're putting in front of, like they bring to you? Like,
so the only
just so
time
we can use the same words. Like, hey, you're never getting in there. So
no, I don't know that I have like a formula that I always do it the same way. But you know, if you come into me with a 3.0 and an 1100 and you say Harvard, right? I mean,
yeah.
but I reserve that never going to happen for where I really, because weird things also happen in college admissions. So I'm careful about the never going to happen thing.
I'm just looking more for like the words, like what. Like,
it's hot. I mean, for you, I don't know that you should do that at all, because then that creates like dynamic at home that's not good.
So we should just punt back to you?
I think you should punt back to you. Yeah, you should email me and say, I'm concerned because this is the school, there's expectation here. What do you, ask me what I think, and then I can say to you, I don't know what's gonna happen. And then I can finesse the language.
I mean, I think we can figure out it's never gonna happen, because
Yeah.
you can input it onto the website and it spits out your chances.
You know what, I will say this, in the end, if a student wants to apply to it, It's Never Gonna Happen school, the student's gonna apply to the It's Never Gonna Happen school. What we really worry about is a student loading up here and getting 10 rejection letters, because that takes a toll on a student's, still fragile self-esteem at this age. So we wanna make sure that there's good stuff coming in, even if they're gonna get shot down by a few schools. And just about this performing arts thing, because that's another thing. When we work with students who are artists, performing artists, also athletes fall into this category, we oftentimes end up with two columns of schools. So if a student is pursuing a Bachelor of Music degree, a Bachelor of Music degree requires an audition. A, I really can't assess talent. B, I don't know how you're gonna audition on a particular day. C, I don't know what the criteria and the competition is for the school. So you may have your audition-based schools. We're gonna come in with another list that says, here are schools that have really strong Bachelor of Arts, undergraduate music major options for you. And we want you to apply to both. And 2 of the BA degrees have to be likely schools, because there's no such thing as a likely at a conservatory level. That's not a thing. So we will make sure that we have, and what that means, unfortunately, is that you may find those students applying to more schools than a student who's just doing straight up academic programs. Same thing for athletes. Questions on this?
I like to say too, with the huge schools, I like to look at the statistics. If a school accepts 6% of their applicants, I tell the student that means 94% are not getting admitted. So if there's a 6% chance of rain today, would you bring an umbrella? You know, kind of putting it in, not personalizing it, but just kind of a statistical reality sometimes can help. All right, so what's next? The PSAT scores are gonna be arriving soon. And as I said, we will help counsel which test is a better fit for your student to try. We're gonna be meeting with the students in January after break. The reason we're not meeting with them right now is we want them to be focusing on their academics, because that really should be their priority. It does not make sense to enter into the college process at a time of stress for them with exams and end of the semester, so that should be their focus. And then we'd like you to complete and return the parent questionnaire. There'll be 2 forms we ask you to do during the process. This one kind of gives us a sense of what your hopes and dreams are for the process and a background you think we should know about your student. And then later in the fall, we're gonna ask for what you might have heard of from other schools too, called a brag form. And that's gonna be any stories about your student. Maybe, you know, when Junior was little, she always liked to play with Legos, and now she wants to be an engineer. Little anecdotes like that can be very helpful when to give us context and to add some pop to our rec letters, okay? But for this one, it's very basic, it won't take you long, but the few minutes you take to prepare that makes our meeting that more productive and that more individualized. The students will have a form of their own, and it's always kind of interesting to see what the students say and what mom and dad say, okay? And then we would like you to join us for a family meeting. 1 parent, please, and a student. There are instructions on the Sign Up Genius, but we really would like to shy away from missing classes. So if you could look at study hall, lunch tutorials, we have some after-school slots, that would be ideal, okay?
And we're trying to make these meetings where we are both present as much as possible. Unlike a lot of other schools where they divvy up the class, we're not divvying up the class in that way. So we're gonna try to get to know all the students, both of us.
Where is that parent questionnaire?
So it is on the college resource page. It's also a hyperlink in this, which will be on the resource page. Actually, I'll email this to everybody too. So you have this.
So when do you want us to have that?
I mean, as soon as, before the at least 24 hours before your meeting, scheduled meeting, but if you want to do it sooner, that'd be great. We can start to collect them anytime. Okay, so this is part 2. If you don't feel like this applies, you won't be offended if you leave. Yes.
Can I ask you a question before we start part 2? Goes back to part 1. So if my older daughter, when she was going through this process, you know, she's having a hard time like other kids, don't worry about it. If you don't like it, you can always transfer. I don't know if Samantha is going to be and my older daughter was receptive to that idea, kind of took the stress off. I don't know if Samantha is going to be receptive to that idea or not, but what are your thoughts about introducing that idea during the process?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it depends in college admissions on the student situation. I tend to not talk about transferring with most students because I feel like ideally you want to find the right place and stick it out. When you transfer, you then enter an institution where you don't know anybody, there's already stuff going on, already clubs and activities and friendships made and research, and you're in your major and you don't know the department, and maybe you missed the foundation course in your major, and now, so there are disadvantages, I think, to transferring. Now, having said that, you know, lots of students successfully transfer. And we've had students successfully transfer. And we've had students start at small schools and then end up at the University of Maryland because they feel like, okay, now I'm ready, or it's a major that they offer that's not offered at my small school. So that happens, but I tend to not talk a lot about transferring at the initial stage.
Yeah, I guess unless it's a stress release valve, you know, if your student is the type of student that is worried about making the wrong decision, and then that is impeding him or her from going forward and making decisions in the process. But I think, you know, depending on the student, if knowing that something's changeable, reversible, if that's helpful to them, I think there's no harm in it.
Or if a student who's really just not ready,
Mhm.
we talk about options.
Do you guys talk to them about, okay, fine, these are lovely schools, but what are you gonna do when you get out? Like, it's lovely to have this degree, but, you know, an art history major isn't going to get a job besides in a, you know. So do you talk to them about, I mean, it's one thing to manage their expectations, but also coming out on the other end, you have to have something that's a viable degree.
Yeah, well, so most college students change their majors.
I get that part,
So-
but
I mean, we talk a little bit about that. We do some, so the Do What You Are has some career component built in. We have in Navient some career exploration pieces. We don't do a lot of career stuff with students simply because college is a time of sort of figuring that out and exploration. What I do say to students all the time is the days of going to college and sitting in class and getting a degree, getting a job when you're done because you were a good student, you went to class, that's done. You have to go into the career office, you have to have internships, you've got to have high quality summer jobs. And you have to be proactive. You don't wait until your senior year to start. So I have those kinds of more general conversations about taking advantage of resources on the college, rather than discouraging a student from a major, because, I mean, I was a philosophy major, so I don't.
and that's okay,
tend to
because
not
you go to
dis-
graduate school. I mean, again, I'm looking at it as, who starts that conversation? You know, if you want to be an English major, that's lovely, but you're going to graduate school. Like, who starts that conversation?
So that conversation we'll have.
Okay.
So if a student says, I mean, back to that whole sort of planning out your category of school, and it's the same thing like with a student who says they want to go to medical school. I mean, the best thing to do, if you're saying you want to be an English major or, you know, humanities major, you're probably looking at graduate school. So let's make sure, you want to make sure that your undergraduate degree is a place that's going to launch you for graduate school well. So yes, absolutely have
Okay.
that conversation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any, do you talk with them about gap years, about gap year programs, kind of the interim programs like Dynamy and things like that?
We do, and we
You
have
do?
very few who bite.
Really?
Yeah, very few.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's a bunch of reasons. It's partly parents who are worried that if my student takes a year off, they'll never go back. I hear that a lot. It's partly students who want to be normal and regular and do what everybody else is doing. It can be expensive to do the gap years too, so there's that. What other objections do you hear?
Well, I don't hear, I think you covered the objections. But there are entire college fairs just for gap years also, and websites. What I encourage the students to do is go ahead and go through the process with their peers. Like apply now to college
Right.
while you've got these supports in place, the supports at home in place, your peers are in it with you. And then ask the college to defer you, meaning you not ask the college to defer you, ask the college to, you'd like to defer, meaning they'll hold that spot for you. You go on a formal program as a gap year, and then you come back to the college. So
Right.
that's the approach that I kind of
That's what
personally.
I've heard as
yeah.
well. I just find it's hard once they get rolling on the college stuff to keep them also rolling on the taking the extra year to mature and
Yeah,
think outside the box.
yeah, that's true.
It is, it's challenging. It is challenging.
And just not to go backwards, but I can't resist, I just came off of 2 college tours. The career piece, they spend a lot of time talking to us about freshman year, they bring the students in and talk about resumes and, you know, what summer opportunity might be good for you. Sophomore year, this is the next step they do. Junior year. Because the outcome we're focused on here is that your student has a happy, healthy education at McLean and then finds a good fit for college. Then once the student moves to college, they're focused on the outcome. Okay, now we've got to make good on this, on the parents' investment, and how are we going to get the kids into a successful field? So just not to go backwards, but not backwards.
I have a question.
So my daughter did college admissions through her high school, which was Sidwell Friends. She ended up at Wellesley College, but for the admissions process, our person that was assigned to us would have conversations about our daughter with the colleges she applied to at the time.
Yeah.
Some colleges allow that, some colleges don't.
Correct.
Do you have, and I know you guys talked about this letter, and I don't know if we had that letter.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, can you speak to that? Do
Yep,
you
we
guys
talk
have
with
that
colleges.
same relationship
Yep.
with the colleges that allow that versus?
Absolutely. We just did a rep call, they're called advocacy calls yesterday, where we spoke to the rep and the rep gave us a sense of the pool, like what did it look like this year? We had 17% more applicants, or this was our scores, this is how it's looking, and sometimes they'll do that. So yes, we do have relationships with, not relationships, but friendships with the reps. We've both been in this combined 45 years. We did the math yesterday. 45 years, so that's a lot of relationships with reps, or we can call and say, how's it looking? And that doesn't necessarily mean we're saying, get this kid in, get this kid in, get this kid in. It's more like, you know, do you think the student would be a good fit here? And here are all the students' great qualities. And did you know this? We wrote about it in our rep letter, but hey, since then, Junior just did this. So yes.
Yeah, that made us feel really comfortable as parents, because we were scared to death for the school she was applying to, like, you're never gonna get in. You know, we as parents felt like, whereas the rep felt like, oh no, you know, I've talked to the school, I know what they're looking for, I know what your daughter has accomplished since this time, that time. And so it was a medium, you know, halfway decent fit. So, like, okay, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, so some of you, I guess everybody has a layer here, on what do you do if your student has a learning disability. We actually had this conversation about this slide, because Kathleen is new to this school. We talked about sort of language about disability versus learning differences, and we talk at McLean a lot about learning differences, which is fine. You really have to talk about disabilities when you're talking about college, because you're getting nothing unless you have a diagnosed learning disability. So we need to be very clear in the language that we're using when we're talking about what happens on a college campus, which is very, very different from what happens here, which is like, I need extra time. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't happen in college. So again, me with the background, right? So just so you know, in 1970, Curry College was the first college to offer a program specifically for students with learning disabilities, and it was a loaner for quite some time. 1990, you got the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so more students are sort of coming out as having learning disabilities and applying to college, and colleges are needing to provide services and programs. There's a big chunk of time in between the two. What's important to know is that we are not here in ADA. K through 12 is very different from what happens in the adult world. ADA says that colleges cannot discriminate because of a disability, but they are not required to evaluate students for admission any differently from the typical student. So they can set their standards and they can hold everybody to the same standard. So what that means is if they require that a student has 3 years of foreign language to be admitted to the school, they can require that the student has that everybody has that. Now, there are many colleges that will waive that if we explain it. We have to disclose the disability, and it's okay, but you need to know there's some colleges where that's not, you can't do that, that's not a thing. They're not going to admit a student who doesn't have foreign language in high school, period. Same thing with math, they can require math to a certain level. They can also refuse to consider the impact of a learning disability on grades or test scores. So they can set their standards, the student has to meet standards. What I will say is this, if you run up against a school that pushes back on, well, we want you to do this, but I haven't done this, it means it's not a good fit school. So like going back to those original slides, if at the admission stage you're getting pushed back, you don't want that for 4 years. So just let it go, move on. The other piece is that they are not required to change the curriculum due to a disability. Now, many colleges offer things like a cultures class instead of foreign language. There are many that will do that. They have substitutions, and there are colleges that waive, but not all of them do it. And so that's good to know. They do not have to do that. So the key question for students and families is, what is the disability and what kind of support am I going to need in order to be successful? And that's a hard question for high school students, because here everything is sort of integrated into the daily existence. And sometimes our teachers will do quizzes or tests where, you know, they know, oh, everybody takes extra time normally, so I'm going to make it a shorter assessment, and then, oh, everybody's done on time. So students sometimes are like, they just don't know, because they are not in college to know what to expect. But students need to know themselves. And one of the keys is that psych ed report. And students have to be able to own the disability and say, this is what this is my disability, this is how it impacts me, and these are some of the accommodations that I have at school, and these are things that I need in order to be successful. And frankly, people will be really impressed if a student can articulate that. I have if you picked it up, it's on the table, and anybody on Facebook, we're gonna send these with the presentation home, but Landmark College Guide is a guide checklist of things that are skills that are important for college. And then there's a handout on the differences between high school and college. This is the guide I'm referring to. And here's some of the issues that are facing students with learning disabilities and ADHD on college campuses. The transition from a high school schedule to a college schedule, that's the biggest one right there. So we have them Monday through Friday from 8:15 to 3:15, and here we're doing the same thing every day with variation at lunchtime, and that's it. In college, as you know, you've got a couple classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe one's at 10, the other's at 1:30, and then Tuesday, Thursday, you've got an 11 and a 2, or then maybe you've got one day where you've got a lab, but it's only one day a week. So it's sort of all over the place, the schedule. So managing that, particularly the students with the ADHD, that's a tough, tough transition for many students. And the other piece of it is that there's so much free time, so that lack of structure. All of a sudden there's always free time because you're not in class as much. That becomes really challenging for students. Also the independence, making one's own decisions. You know, when am I gonna eat? When am I gonna do my laundry? And is it gonna pile up till I have no socks? Wear the stinky socks to class today because I gotta get my laundry done later. But all of the independent life skills in college, that can be challenging. The social environment, making good choices for oneself, knowing one's limits, things like that, that can be challenging. Sleep deprivation is huge on college campuses, pulling all-nighters, not effective when you pull an all-nighter, making sure that you get enough sleep. Being resourceful is important. The timing of classes. So a student who really struggles in the morning probably should not take an 8 a.m. class unless you have to take the 8 a.m. class. So figuring out, or the flip side, for me it would be like right after lunch. So, but being aware of timing when when registering for classes, the process of registering for classes and being timely so you get into the things that you want to get into. Balancing a course load so that you don't have everything as a writing intensive or everything as heavy duty math science all at once. Being proactive in dealing with professors, going to office hours, balancing subjects, activities, and also the key self-advocacy skills. Being able to say, I need help, and going in and being proactive about it. But these are they're challenges really for everybody, but for students with disabilities, these are particularly challenging. And that's why there are now a number of programs specifically for students with learning disabilities to support the transition to college. Some of them are just one-year programs. Some of them are phase out over 4 years, and some of them are, you can stick around in your junior and senior year if you want to. So the difference between services and programs, it's all listed here, but basically services, programs, you're paying an extra fee, there's an application process, they only take the students that they feel are gonna benefit most. There's a specific program staff. It's not necessarily just peer tutors. These are learning professionals who can strategize and help organize students. You have weekly or sometimes twice a week meetings with your learning specialist. Oftentimes you have priority registration for classes and early orientation. Self-advocacy is still important, but these people help bolster that up, so it's not as important, yes.
What does include socialization skills?
So there are some programs that will include socialization skills, and increasingly, there are some, not a lot, but there are some programs specifically for students who are on the autism spectrum.
What does that mean exactly, though? What do they do?
They do group work. I don't know exactly
Okay.
what they do inside the. I just know that they offer this. So they do, how to they help, which also helps with the self-advocacy, but how to negotiate the social dynamics of a college campus.
How to get along with a roommate.
How to get along with a roommate. Yep. Yeah. And the other key is the faculty education. And for years, I just sort of never thought about this until I was out at the University of Denver a few years ago, and I had a meeting with the woman who runs their program, and she talked about doing educational workshops for the professors. And So I worked on a college campus. I know how hard it is to get professors to show up for anything. Like, you know, if you have tenure, you do what you want to do, and they go to meetings they want to go to, or they don't necessarily have to, but she's like, they show up. So, because they know, since there's a program at Denver, they know that they have these students in the classroom. So the other piece that is not what they say here is that at the schools that have programs, it's integrated into the culture that there's an understanding that in the classroom, professors have students who have a wide range of learning styles. And so that's very different too. So the way the college search, you still do all of the same things, but we want to also include a conversation about learning needs when we're talking about what's going to be a good fit for the student. We want to talk about who to meet with, visiting, and making sure that psych ed is updated and ready to go. In terms of admission, the process is really not all that different. The key is, are we going to disclose a learning disability or not? So we will not disclose a learning disability without a conversation with you in our letters. Typically, we will say that the disability is not the best topic for it. Occasionally it works for an essay, but we would like the student to focus on other things in the main essay rather than the disability. In many cases, we don't disclose it because the student has compensated, learned strategies and skills, and done really well in school, so there's no reason to necessarily disclose. But if a student has a math disability, is on a lower track in math, gets C's all the way along, and all the other grades are great, we have to address the elephant in the room. So in some cases, it's important to disclose the disability.
What would be a reason not to?
There's no evidence of it anywhere, and the student's doing really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even if the child is compensated, don't you want to demonstrate that the child has been able to compensate?
It depends on this. It depends because not everyone sitting in an admissions committee understands this, and
okay.
I don't want to raise. Yeah. Because the question then for someone who has no background in learning disabilities could end up saying they've done well there, but what's going to happen when it's harder? Like I just don't even. I didn't want to go there. The other question is who's reviewing. Program staff reviews, if you're applying to a program, they do their own review. Admissions is reviewing the admissions application, but the two will talk. And typically what happens is if the program folks say, we think we can work with this student, it will bump an admissions decision in a positive direction. The other thing to keep in mind is that programs can fill up early. A good example of that is Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, which has one of the most highly regarded, I guess now, LD programs out there. You pretty much have to apply early decision. It's hard to get into the program, and they fill up a lot of the class on the early decision. Some resources. I use this one, K&W Guide, Princeton Review, Amazon. Great. But tomorrow for today. So these are some of the resources that we use. And then, wrap it up. Okay. So I think maybe what we'll do is take off Facebook Live folks. If you've been there, thank you for joining us. There will be a live stream, I guess, there. We will be sending home the materials that everybody else has here. And please sign up for the meetings and fill out the forms for us, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.